Bad storm, Guy.
Daybreak comes in just a very few minutes down there, like it does here, around a little bit after 7, and they're going to get a lot better picture. From the eye of the storm, you got about a 10 to 15 mile area just on the north and northeast side of that storm where the surge occurs. It's very compact, and that's where all of this energy comes from. And the Biscayne Bay area up to North Miami and Miami Beach are going to feel not only the winds, but they're going to see water like they've never seen, and it ain't rain. It's just coming right in from the ocean.
It's the ocean.
Now, I've got a brother-in-law that lives in West Palm Beach. All his kids are up here. He's getting a lot of rain. He's going to have about 5 or 6 inches of rainfall before this is all over. He's boarded up the house. Everybody in Wellington is going to do fine, but they're going to think that they're in the wrong part of the country. Chris, enlighten us from West Palm Beach down as to what's going on, because the worst is further south than West Palm Beach.
That's right. You know, we were talking about the storm surge could go up anywhere between 13 feet or 15 feet. Common storm surges for these Category 4 type storms are up to 18 feet, so that's what we could see. Take a look now at what we have here. This is our southeast radar picture out of the Miami area. You can definitely see the storm as it moved through overnight and made landfall. As we said, about an hour and a half to 2 hours ago, it did make landfall near the Homestead area. A lot of damage, though, reported near Coral Gables. That's where most of the damage is reported so far. That's where the strongest part of the storm went through. We're going to zoom into this picture a little bit so you can see exactly where everything is located. You'll see Miami there on your screen. Let's zoom in closer. To the south of Miami, you have Key Biscayne, also the Coral Gables area, and of course the storm will continue moving to the west across the southern tip of Florida. Of course, Guy, these storms are fed from the warm water. As it moves over the southern tip of Florida, it'll lose just a little bit of strength, then kick back into gear as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. The folks in Texas, also Louisiana, are going to have to watch that storm as it continues to pick up speed once again.
You're going to have to remember this, too, that you've got the remnants of Storm Lester hitting in the Phoenix area, and that's part of a frontal system, an intense low developing there in the southwest part of the United States. It could have a very real effect on the wind currents that feed into Andrew as it gets into the Gulf. So we've got an interesting little storm system on our hands that could be around a while.
And they talk about this storm, you know, moving across land. Well, that part of South Florida, there's not much land. It's mostly mangrove swamps, which is nothing but hot water.
So some alligators in the Gulf.
What I mean is it's not going to be weakening very much.
It sure is
at all.
Not a bit.
All right.
It's an hour. It's pounding Miami this morning. The storm, the most powerful to hit the United States in over 20 years, moved ashore at 5 a.m. and has all of southern Florida preparing for the worst today, Monday, August 24th, 1992.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryant Gumbel and Catherine Currick.
And good morning. Welcome to Today. Good morning and welcome to Today on a Monday morning. As we greet you, we're going to go direct from Studio 3B to the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida, where we are joined on the line by the center's director, Dr. Bob Sheets. Dr. Sheets, good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
What's the latest on Andrew's status?
Well, indeed, the hurricane just moved right across to us. We were in the eye wall here with the building shaking pretty good for a while, and the building suffered some damage, but we're in good shape. As far as the hurricane is concerned, it's moving toward the west now across the Everglades. Will be threatening the southwest coast of Florida here in the next hour or so, and then move out over the open Gulf and be a threat to the north Gulf Coast up in the Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas area within about 2 days.
Once it moves out into the Gulf, does it figure to pick up in intensity?
It's pretty strong right now. We had at least a strong Category 3 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That means probably 130 miles per hour or maybe even slightly stronger than that. And then it's not going to weaken much as it moves across the peninsula, maybe 20 miles per hour, and then probably pick that right up by this afternoon.
Its winds had been higher. There had been some speculation that it might even be upgraded to a Category 5. It does not figure to get to that level of intensity?
It did not get that way before it struck this coast. Fortunately, the potential perhaps is there. 5s are very rare, but the potential may be there as it gets out into the Gulf.
You talked about it coming ashore on the Gulf Coast, Texas, parts of Louisiana too. How far north, how far inland does it figure to do damage?
Well, right now across the Florida Peninsula here in Dade County, I think that here in South Florida, Miami, I think the damage is probably substantial. Of course, we haven't gotten outside to see what's going on except around our own building. And then as it moves out here and then moves on toward the North Gulf Coast, that's about 2 days from now.
It came in at high tide, we understand. Can you tell us anything about the rains and the flooding?
Rains were no problem because it was moving so fast that I don't think we had any problem with there. The flooding around Biscayne Bay, we've heard some reports of about 8 feet or so, and so I'm sure that there was some water up on Key Biscayne, Miami Beach area. The wind damage in the South Dade area is probably going to be some substantial amounts.
So, Bob Sheets, let's see if we can do a bottom line on this. Came ashore on the southeast coast, moving across right now on the west coast of Florida, figures to go out in the Gulf, perhaps will pick up intensity, and then in about 2 days threaten parts of Texas, Louisiana?
That's right. As far as the center would likely move inland over the North Gulf Coast, the probabilities are about the same from Mobile across to the Port Arthur area.
All right. Dr. Bob Sheets, thanks very much. Appreciate you being with us.
You're welcome.
Although any hurricane in which you're caught seems horrific, Andrew truly is. In force and in fact, it is one of the worst hurricanes of this century. NBC's Bob Hager is in Miami with more on that. Bob, good morning.
Good morning, Bryant. Well, you could tell it was a big one when it came ashore here just before dawn, actually about 25 miles south of Miami, over the community of Homestead, Florida, and there were gusts clocked up to 164 miles an hour. Phenomenal. The building where we rode out the storm, a cinder block building, actually shook. It was a dangerous, frightening storm. This is how Hurricane Andrew looked as the winds roared ashore. It was an awesome sight, a powerful storm reminiscent of the big Hurricane Hugo, which had done $5 billion damage in South Carolina 3 years ago. This morning in South Florida, power is out over a widespread area. Trees are down, buildings have been damaged. And yet there were some, like this homeless man, who chose to ride the storm out exposed to the elements. But because communications are intermittent, it's impossible to tell just how serious damage has been. It seems apparent it will be heavy.
Back up.
The governor has declared a state of emergency. The National Guard may be called out later today to begin the long job of recovery here. So now, as Bob Sheets says, we may be back here for the next couple of days if indeed Andrew heads back out into the Gulf of Mexico, gathers intensity there as it goes over that warm water again, and then threatens Louisiana or Texas. Brian?
Bob, I know you're in Miami, so you may not be in a great position to answer this question, but how broad an area of South Florida has been hit? Can you tell us that?
Yes, I think it'll go from here on down to the Keys. Not much north of Miami, but I think the main damage is going to turn out to be to South Miami, to, as we said, the Homestead area as well, over into the Everglades, and most of the southern part of Florida below Miami.
All right, Bob, we're hopeful that damage is just structural. Thank you. Authorities are hoping that their broad evacuation orders, issued well in advance of the storm, will minimize Andrew's deadly potential. More than 1 million South Florida residents were told to flee in the face of the hurricane, and as a result, evacuation shelters are jammed. NBC's Noah Nelson has more on that.
By early evening, the streets of downtown Miami were deserted, except for some of the city's homeless. They had ignored warnings to seek shelter from the coming hurricane.
What are y'all gonna do tonight?
Try to make it.
Aren't you afraid of what the wind and the water? I mean, the water's gonna be up over these things.
Well, if it get too bad, we just move up to high grounds.
Where you gonna go?
Anywhere we feel it's safe.
Even those who had been through hurricanes before were playing it right to the edge.
You're going to shelter.
Police units and buses were out offering those still on the street one last chance to come in.
We're here trying to help them, explaining to them they're not going to jail. We're taking them to a shelter, like a school, where they're going to be fed and they're going to be safe from the storm. However, they refuse to go. Those that refuse, we can't force.
No one had to force thousands of families who went to Red Cross shelters voluntarily. By midnight, many of the shelters were full.
It's not the most comfortable place to be, of course, but I feel safe here.
Yeah, great. Look at the camera, boo.
The weather had become an equalizer. Vacationers from Germany, young women from Japan, and tourists from Argentina.
I don't know what is a hurricane because in my country it's not the hurricane.
You don't have hurricanes in Argentina?
No, never.
Many people accept the shelters as their temporary home, hoping they will have something to go back to once the hurricane passes. Noah Nelson, NBC News, Miami.
Here at Bob Sheets' note moments ago that Andrew is making its way across the state. So even as Florida's southeast coast is being battered, residents of the state's west coast are preparing for Andrew's expected arrival sometime this afternoon. NBC's Henry Champ is in Orlando, Florida now with more on that. Henry, good morning.
Good morning, Bryant. There are scenes like this all through Central Florida. Evacuees packing into school gymnasiums after they fled the Miami area last night to seek safety.
In Orlando, the hotel lobbies were jammed. Evacuees from South Florida escaping the fury of Hurricane Andrew, but unable to find rooms.
I called maybe about 20, 30 hotels, no vacancies.
They started coming Sunday afternoon, choking the highways north. By nightfall, the main streets of Orlando were jammed. The city has 80,000 hotel rooms. It's the site of Disney World. But that wasn't enough.
Orlando is sold out. There are no rooms in all of Orlando. We're just trying to find rooms right now.
Despite the warnings, most people left their departure to the last minute.
I made a decision that it's better to be safe than sorry and took my family out and came to Orlando.
Florida's north central communities set up special shelters, knowing exactly what kind of damage could occur.
Well, right now it's better than anything, because otherwise, if we hit the hurricane there, we live in a mobile home, it would have been dangerous.
It might have been this country's biggest evacuation ever. State police at one time were telling us that the bumper-to-bumper traffic coming out of the Miami area actually stretched for more than 100 miles. Bryant?
My goodness. Okay. Henry Champ, thank you. Florida's Governor Lawton Chiles has already declared a state of emergency because of the hurricane. Among other things, he's called up 1,500 National Guard troops, and we'll be talking with the governor in just a few moments. Before it hit South Florida, Hurricane Andrew battered the Bahamas with winds of up to 120 miles an hour and claimed at least 4 lives. No word yet on how many others were injured. We understand the trees were down and roads were flooded. And while Willard Scott has the morning off, we are joined by Joe Whitty, meteorologist. Joe, what can you tell us about the path that Andrew is on?
Andrew is halfway across Florida already, leaving Dade County, moving into Monroe County, which is basically Everglade country. And so there's not many people there, so that's good news. And probably within the next 2 to 3 hours, it will be out over the Gulf of Mexico, and over those warm waters will start to gather more energy, and then it curves up towards Louisiana, Texas by about Wednesday night.
I'm sorry, without being too specific or too technical, why does it necessarily gain energy when it's over the warm waters of the Gulf?
That's the source of it. It's like being on a hot stove, and a lot of that evaporation from the warm water adds the energy or the water vapor, and as that rises, it condenses, even rises faster because of the energy released by the condensation process.
And conversely, it usually loses momentum over land, but unfortunately there's not a lot of land in the state of Florida for it to lose momentum over.
Yes, that's true. It's going to cross Florida probably about 4 to 5 hours, so it'll be over warm water. And it passed over the Gulf Stream, which was a temperature of 86 degrees. And the Gulf waters are shallow. They're relatively warm, 86 degrees. They figure the water temperature of 84 degrees is sort of the critical line. If you have water warmer than that, then that's really conducive to firing up.
How broad an area of alert are we talking about along the Gulf Coast when we talk about it going up into Texas, Louisiana? How big an area are we talking about?
At this stage, when we're talking about 36 to 48 hours ahead of time, we're probably talking plus or minus 200 miles for weather watches. But generally,
Can you tell us from where to where?
Generally from around the Galveston, Houston area up through Mobile, Alabama, generally. But that's really 36 to 48 to possibly 72 hours away. So we've got a long time to track that and watch that very closely.
Could it be upgraded, Joe, to a Category 5 potentially, or not?
We have to watch it. Remember, Saturday morning, this was only a tropical storm, and then all of a sudden it blew up like crazy, and it was almost a 4. So that's an update on the hurricane situation. Let's go to the local forecast around your neck of the woods.
Good evening. This may be just the beginning. Andrew is heading for other coastal states.
People in South Florida are thankful they survived this storm. Doug Evans was in Miami when Andrew roared through early this morning. Doug?
Well, right now we're dealing with the aftermath of Andrew. One of those aftermaths, the consequences right here. This is a precious commodity in the city of Miami tonight. It is simply drinking water, bottled water, but it is the #1 priority in Miami for officials and for hundreds of thousands of residents tonight, getting fresh water to them. The lines, many of them have burst, and there is simply not fresh water to drink. But as we toured today, Miami, we found that there are many needs today.
Neighborhood after neighborhood, this is southern Miami today in the wake of Andrew last night. The most powerful storm to hit southern Florida ever. The big one, they called it. 160-mile-an-hour winds in South Miami ripped through these streets, taking trees and roofs, winds that were no match for automobiles and certainly no match for wildlife. The power is out to about 500,000 people. Stores remain closed. Some are damaged, some are destroyed. This is much of southern Miami today. Last night, more than 50,000 took refuge in area evacuation shelters. No doubt, the majority of residents did what Bill and Tila Patterson did. They braved the storm at home rather than heed the warnings to evacuate. For hours behind storm shutters closed tight, their only link to the outside world was a weather radio and the sound of Andrew knocking on their door. In the morning light, that nighttime banging turned out to be the branches of their fallen trees.
And no doubt the Pattersons tonight are doing what thousands are doing here in Miami, clearing away the debris from their house and from their yards. It is complete devastation here in southern Miami tonight. Our Bruce Arian is down here. You've seen much of that devastation from the air, Bruce.
Yeah, Doug, and we have to make the comparison with Hugo. I mean, that's the one that's most recent in our memories. As we flew down through Fort Lauderdale and through Miami, trying to see the devastation that was so widely talked about, we had a hard time finding it until we got south of the city. Take a look at these shots from Skycam. You'll see what we're talking about. It was there as we crossed Biscayne Bay, we could really see where the hurricane came ashore. This point is about 5 or 6 miles south of Miami proper. As it came across Biscayne Bay, it really did a job, hit Coral Gables, and then it just about completely took out the Tamiami Airport out there. That was a complete shambles. The hangars were gone, the airplanes were ripped apart, and it was out there in that southwest corridor that runs due southwest about 240 degrees for a distance of 25 or 30 miles or so out of Miami. That's where we saw the heaviest damage. Very heavily populated out there in southwest Dade County. A lot of small communities with wood frame homes, a lot of trailer parks, Homestead Air Force bases out in that area, and as you can see from those pictures, just absolute devastation. Quite frankly, it looked to me almost like a 30-mile wide tornado. It was that kind of force that this thing had. So when they called for winds that were greater than Hugo's, I think that they were absolutely correct, at least from what we could see from the air.
There's so many trailer parks out there because that's where all the migrant farm workers end up out in Homestead. In that area, it's where all the crops are, and it's really sad that
and you know,
hit there.
And can you imagine, you know, people talk about, you'll see stories as we go along here about people riding out the storm and so on. Can you imagine them trying to ride it out in one of those trailer homes that just absolutely blew apart? It would have been terrible if people did that instead of evacuating as they were told to do.
Bruce, we know that some guardsmen are down there guarding stores. Has there been much looting?
There has been, John. As we flew into town, the first thing that we heard from other pilots in the air was that there were calls for reinforcement from the air. In fact, there was some gunfire going on, so they had to be very careful how they handled the situation. But they're starting to get a lid on it right now, and as you point out, the National Guard is starting to make quite a presence known here in the city.
Thank you, Bruce. As Andrew heads out over the warm waters of the Gulf, coastal towns from Texas to Alabama are preparing for the worst. Louisiana's governor is advising people in New Orleans and other areas to consider leaving well ahead of Andrew. He's concerned that roads may be clogged if everyone waits until the very last minute. National Guard units are on standby in case they're needed. Everyone is on the alert for what's being called a potentially disastrous storm of enormous proportions.
Many of the wise people who chose to leave South Florida came here to Georgia. Motels in South Georgia and places like Albany are packed with refugees. Some came north to escape the storm. Others were on their way to Florida and had to cut their trip short. Many of them are packing tonight, getting ready to go back home. People hoping to get to South Florida today found few ways out of Hartsfield. Many passengers were stranded last night when the Miami airport closed due to high winds and the power outage. Today, many airlines have rerouted flights to Orlando and West Palm Beach, but don't expect to get on one. They're booked solid until late tomorrow. People trying to call South Florida were a bit luckier. The AT&T Center in Conyers, they brought in teams of people and electronic maps to help monitor the traffic of calls to and from Miami. The main objective right now is to limit the number of calls going into Florida so that the folks down there can use those lines to get in touch with loved ones.
And although phone lines are busy, some radio operators are able to reach the areas hit by Andrew. These amateur ham radio operators are part of a U.S. network, and many times they are the only link to a disaster area.
Go ahead, Maurice. Fort Myers and Fort Charlotte had minimal damage.
The great thing about this network is all the participants are volunteers who are simply trying to help. Of course, as Bruce mentioned, the last big hurricane to hit the Southeast was Hugo. That was 3 years ago.
Hugo, like Andrew, was a Category 4. After plowing through the Caribbean, it took dead aim on Charleston, South Carolina. Hugo killed 89 people, left almost $6 billion in damage. Byron Brown is in Charleston with a look back at the killer storm.
John Terry, the Low Country here, Charleston area, has begun a campaign to help those who helped us nearly 3 years ago. When Hurricane Hugo hit the Low Country nearly 3 years ago, an outpour of support came from all over the country. Strangers brought everything from chainsaws to food and water. Today, people throughout the Charleston area haven't forgotten the help so many people gave us and are ready to pay it back.
The main reason why we're going is I don't think there's anybody more uniquely qualified to be able to assist Miami than Charleston. We definitely know what they're going through, what problems they're going to encounter, what's going to happen down there.
Low Country paramedics are on their way to Miami at this hour, taking generators, medical supplies, and most of all, manpower. But the help doesn't stop there. Sailors from the USS McDonough and 95 SX Radio have teamed up to collect food and water for the victims of the storm. This truck is set up in the parking lot of Sam's Wholesale.
So what kind of stuff are you collecting?
Canned goods, water. It's got to be bought water out of stores. It can't be your own tap water. Clothing, any kind of canned goods would be fine. I just hope the people here in Charleston don't forget how the people helped us out during Hurricane Hugo.
Even Charleston County Council is lending a helping hand. The county has already sent county officials to help South Florida assess the damage, and the county is collecting canned food, water, and diapers at the Romney Street Recycling Center. People here in Charleston will be collecting food and water and supplies all night long, and when they get a truckload, they plan to leave first thing in the morning. Back to you, John and Terry.
Thank you, Byron.
Johnny's been tracking the storm for us and joins us now from the Weather Watch office for the latest on Hurricane Andrew, which, Johnny, is still a very dangerous and unpredictable storm.
It certainly is, John, and I'm sure the folks along the Gulf Coast can't help but go back in their memories to 1969 when Hurricane Camille came in along the central Gulf Coast with winds up close to 200 miles an hour and was the most disastrous tropical system to affect our nation in modern history. That was some kind of a storm system that lasted really with effects all the way up through the mid-Atlantic states later on. Now, we hope that this one won't be of that magnitude, but it is a very strong storm system. It's located right now about 470 miles southeast of New Orleans. It's moving toward the west at 18 miles an hour, and its maximum winds are 140 miles per hour, not expected to decrease in intensity over the warm waters of the Gulf. There's a hurricane watch in effect from Vermilion Bay to Sabine Pass, Texas, and from Pascagoula to Mobile, and there's a hurricane warning in effect along the Gulf Coast from Pascagoula to Vermilion Bay, Louisiana. That is the projected track of the storm system would bring it in that area sometime tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening. And so, of course, the folks along the central Gulf Coast are beginning to batten down, too.
Thank you, John.
Disaster area. Hurricane Andrew sliced across the state with heavy rains and powerful winds. It left behind widespread destruction, but officials said it could have been much worse. The hurricane hit land just before dawn, just south of Miami, and followed a path that took it near Naples and into the Gulf of Mexico. NBC's Robert Hager tonight is in Miami with the latest. Bob?
And what a storm it was, Katie. It literally roared ashore before dawn. When it got here, you didn't need an historian to tell you it was one of the biggest hurricanes of recent decades. The winds pounded Miami and the area south brutally. Some clocked at an incredible 164 miles an hour.
Back up, back up, back up.
And this is the damage those winds did to some neighborhoods south of Miami.
I wouldn't believe that wind alone could do that. But
in a few areas, 9 out of every 10 structures ruined. As the hurricane moved on, residents below crept out to see how their world had changed. Trees down everywhere, 1.2 million people without power. Some may be blacked out for a week. Vehicles piled atop each other. Boats now in the street. rooftops deposited on the beach, a shopping center with one side peeled off, its interior exposed like a dollhouse. The track of Miami's mass transit peeled as well, right off its concrete base. And airports closed, the nose of a big passenger jet flattened into the runway. And this is all that's left of neighborhoods with names like Country Walk, Homestead, and others. And these were the shocked recollections of people who lived in these communities.
It's total fear. It's total fear. You could ask my wife. I was crying, especially the safety of our kids, mainly.
Kids were saying, "Mommy, what happened? Why is God doing this to us?" And my husband was holding the roof. The father-in-law was holding the roof. Everything fell out. This is terrible. I wish I'd never go through this again.
The roof came down. I thought the world was coming in. I thought the world was splitting open. I heard the roof come down.
I thought we were going to die. I started saying prayers. We both were. I thought I was going to die. It was incredible. And the storm is incredible.
Late today, President Bush flew in to be taken on a tour of heavily damaged areas. Earlier, the president had declared southern Florida a federal disaster area. There's been trouble, too, some looting. SWAT police have been called out to deal with it. Also, the Florida National Guard. And there were injuries. A mother cradled her small child with a head injury. There have been 14 deaths in this vicious storm.
Hardest hit areas have been sealed off to outsiders now, and a 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. curfew has been declared. Water supplies have been contaminated. There's a need for fresh water and maybe a need for food in some areas. In other words, there are big problems ahead here, Katie.
Bob Hager, thank you so much. Now the question is, of course, will Hurricane Andrew do to Texas or Louisiana what it did to Florida? Joining us now is Jerry Gerald, Deputy Director of the National Hurricane Center. Tonight he is in Camp Springs, Maryland. Mr. Gerald, where is Andrew now and where is he headed?
Well, Andrew is out in the Gulf of Mexico, about 470 miles southeast of New Orleans. And it's heading west, but we expect it to turn more toward the northwest. We've put up hurricane warnings now along the coast from Pascagoula, Mississippi, over to Vermilion Bay, Louisiana. So that's the area we're targeting next.
When is it expected to next hit land? What time, what day?
We're thinking tomorrow late in the day, tomorrow in the evening, perhaps.
As late as midnight tomorrow?
No, I think it would probably be earlier than that. Probably around dusk or so.
Is there a chance, Mr. Gerald, that it might increase in strength as it goes across the Gulf of Mexico?
Well, Kate, it's a Category 4 now, and Category 5s are extremely rare. I wouldn't expect much intensification, but this is an extremely dangerous hurricane at any rate.
Are evacuation plans underway for the targeted areas?
Oh, I'm sure they are, and I'm not privy to them right from here, but I'm sure they're underway.
What happens to Andrew after it hits those Gulf Coast states?
Well, presumably it will go over land, and after hurricanes go over land, they very quickly die. But even then, they may cause more destruction from rains that you get. You typically have very heavy rains, and so that may cause floods inland.
8 deaths so far, certainly a tragic result. But are you surprised that the loss of life and property was even greater in Florida so far?
The thing that typically kills the most people is storm surge, and because the storm was fairly small in size, not strength, but size, and moving fairly fast, the storm surge was not as big as we might have expected. That may have been a blessing. Usually wind doesn't kill a lot of people. We'll still probably have some casualties after the hurricane in the cleanup. Things like chainsaws and electrocution from home generators that people are going to hook up. So there's still peril in there, and I wouldn't be surprised that the casualty rate goes up from that as well as it goes up just from the non-reporting things that we're not communicating with all the areas down there now.
All right, Jerry Gerald, thanks so much for talking with us this evening.